Okay, again, welcome to this book, David and David. And so we had wrapped up last week on, let's see here, we've gone last bottom paragraph in 80 goes into 81 about halfway through, and we got into it late. So we said we were going to read it again and comment again. So we're just going to double back and then we'll get into the new paragraph. So we'll pick back up on the bottom of 80. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we are mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How could she be anything else? The husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. He commences to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps he's having a secret and exciting affair with the girl who understands. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who's literally gone through hell for him. Why don't you lead us off again, David? You probably did last time. I'll let you go again.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So back on the bottom of page 80, fifth paragraph where David started out, the first sentence is the chances are that we have domestic trouble. So that is a given for me anyways. And all the people I've ever worked with, that's true. But then he follows it up with another situation. He says, perhaps we were mixed up with a woman in fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. So let's call a spade a spade. That's infidelity. Okay, Bill, that is what it is. And it's going to cause a lot of problems, or it has caused problems in the past, and it's going to cause problems in the future. And then it says, we doubt if in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. So yeah, okay, that's true, but let's not minimize and justify our bad behavior. And what does that really looks like for me is if this happened before I got sober, I'm going to pay the consequences for that. And if it happened in my sobriety as a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict, I'm still going to pay the consequences for that. But if I did that, it's because of untreated alcoholism. I'm not living in the principles of 10 and 11 and 12, those disciplines. I'm certainly not going to God over these things. I'm not going to counsel with my sponsor, my running buddies. I'm putting myself in these positions. Why am I doing that? Well, it's really simple for me. The ego regenerates itself. It's got an uncanny ability to regenerate itself. I start flirting. I become real charming, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, I'm stepping over that line, and now there's going to be consequences for that. So next sentence says, but drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. So yeah, it absolutely does. You know why? For me, anyways. It was like having an affair, just if we're just talking about the drinking, not the girl that's complicating life, not that at all. Drinking and drugging was complicated my sex relations in the home because it was like having an affair right underneath my wife's nose. I always got tight at all the wrong times. Maybe we go out to dinner, I had way too many drinks, and we were going to have a romantic evening, or I didn't come home for 2 or 3 days. Whatever the case may be, I've caused a lot of things here. And as we read on here, we're going to find out what happens in my spouse's life and the harms that I caused her. There's 2 ways to look at this sentence for me coming up here. It says, after a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets, these are harms, worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. Another way you can look at that is irritable, restless, and discontented too. But nonetheless, there are harms that I've caused. Absolutely caused. My wife's worn out. Can't count on me for anything. Resentful. You keep doing, and in my case anyway, for a long time, there was no consequences. But I could not be counted on. I could not put her welfare before mine because I'm selfish and self-centered. I don't think about anyone but myself. And that is untreated alcoholism. Uncommunicative. I'm not reacting. I'm not talking to her about anything. Once I put a drink in my body, all bets are off. Once I put dope in my body, all bets are off. And then how could she be anything else? And that's true. How could you be anything else? And the wording he uses there, after a few years, I don't even know if it takes that long, but that's a timeline. And the husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. That's self-pity. Self-pity. Why? I put the ball in motion. I'm the one causing these harms. So I'm waiting for her to make this dramatic internal change inside of her where she doesn't need to change anything. And I come to find out that this program is an internal, that I have a disease that's an internal disease that needs to be resolved with internal solution, which is spiritual in nature. So the deal is here, if I'm a recovered alcoholic and living in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12, this is not my truth. But if I'm not, my ego shows up and I don't go to God or go to someone in counsel here, I'm going to have domestic troubles all the time. And I can tell you that was true for me for a number of 24 hours. And I'm not saying having affairs. I'm just talking about having bad relationships, like with my wife, like arguments and disagreements. And I was in untreated alcoholism until I became accountable to a sponsor, some of my running buddies, and had prayer and meditation with God. Nothing in my life was changing. I kept waiting for her to change. You know what I found out? She didn't need to change anything. I need to change. That's what this program is for. It's not for me to be forcing my will on someone else. It's about me changing internally. So Bill goes on, and, he's looking around the clubs, and maybe this is a process addiction. Maybe it's gambling. Maybe it's other things, food, or whatever the case is. I can substitute however I want to do this. But farther on, I'm not going to talk about the affair that he's talking about here. Later in the paragraph, it talks. There's a question. In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a little thing like that? So here it is. A man so involved often feels so remorseful, and I underline the word at times. At times. When I'm sober, at times. When I don't have a drink in my mind, right? Certain times, right? And especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous, this is a great description for me, a loyal and courageous girl who's literally gone through hell for him. If you know anything about Bill Wilson and Lois' story, this is a description of Lois to the T. This is also a description of my wife, too, because she was a great mother and a really good wife. I was just a raging alcoholic and drug addict that couldn't stop no matter once I put it in my body. And once I stopped, I couldn't stay stopped. In untreated alcoholism, I'm going to act out in whatever form I can to provide for self, always. So that's all I got with that, David.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a really nice job of breaking that whole paragraph down. So I won't double down on too much what you said. I'll just maybe add a little something, that if you've been studying with us, you guys know that I'm a student of language. And so I increasingly, as David and I have been studying the book together, I guess over the last 5 or 6 years, I'm always picking up new stuff, but for whatever reason, this journey through, I'm really being attuned to how Bill is sort of using style, I think, to not just to convey direct information, but to add a little sort of context and subtext. And so of note, there's been a lot in the recent pages where he's easing us into ideas and he's giving us, I think, sort of direction on how to address this with people that we're taking through the steps, right? He's, instead of just saying, hey man, and he does this sometimes too, where he's very cut and dry, very black and white, and says, you're an alcoholic, you have this problem. But other times he's saying, chances are that we have domestic troubles, right? So this is the kind of thing we can start pulling out of someone that we're talking to try to help understand what's been going on in their life or to help them see some truth around it, right? Did you have any issues with your husband, with your wife? Because I sure did. It's opening up another sort of conduit here to get people to get real about their experience. You listen to David talk about it. He's real cut and dry. Terrible raging alcoholic and drug addict, terrible husband, terrible father back then. Not everybody has that clarity. In fact, probably most of us don't when we first come in. We're probably in delusion or at best denial about, our character. So then he's just being generous a little bit more with his language. Perhaps we're mixed up with some women. And again, right back at this time this book was written, there's basically all men, in AA, one or two women, right, running around. Marty Mann and maybe another one. I've got a list somewhere around here. My sponsor had given me the first 100, but it was mostly men. So all this is from the men's perspective. But we know, look at all the women here today, right? Plenty of you women running around on men or running around on other women and men running around on men. Like we've got every possible combination today. It doesn't absolve us from our behavior, no matter what our orientation and love life and history looks like, right? This always These behaviors and this history transcends orientation, right? Because it's all about how we were driven by self to cause these issues, right? So he's saying perhaps, we were doing some things we wouldn't want people to know about it. And then, Bill's sort of warming us, rationalizing us as a way to just consider this, as he so frequently does. Put yourself in the position of the people that we harmed, the people that loved us, right? And mostly he's talking about domestic troubles. We're talking about sort of romantic partner, but I do think this is a little bit more broad. I think this applies to everyone who was close to us in our lives. We found people outside our familial unit, outside our partnership, that would buy into our nonsense. They told us they understood us, right? They bought in. And we loved to saturate them with all the woe is me. But we have these people close to home or at home who really suffered, right? And we need to remember we've got to respect, we made a commitment in that relationship, and we got to come back and work on making it right. And here's the other thing too. I've sponsored many men who they came in and said, I think my wife's going to leave me. She told me to stop drinking so many times and I didn't. I think she's gone for good and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen either, man. Maybe you are going to get divorced. Maybe you're not. That's going to get sorted out, but it's only going to get sorted out if we take these steps together. Okay, so about midpoint on page 81. So the first full paragraph in 81. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we've been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. Abby, nothing in there? Okay. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful paragraph he's talking about, because whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. So have to do is a must. 139 of the must if we've counted so far, and with the help of Kathy and Howard and their big book study, that's what we've come up with. And if you're sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? That's the question. So that's kind of an insensitive question too. I don't know the answer. I am not going to counsel one of my sponsees on that necessarily, unless it's my experience. I know a guy who did it, and I know that they got divorced, and then the guy drank and killed himself. That's a situation. I also know another person who had to be honest and told the whole truth, and they repaired the damage that was done through counseling. So I don't think there's any pat answer on how to do that. It's just a question. And whenever I see a question, I'm going to take these things to God. I'm going to take these things to counsel, and the right answer will come if we wanted to. And undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. So, and I skipped something. I'm sorry. Not always we think. If she knows in a general way, that we have been wild. How do you explain the word wild to your wife?
Yeah.
The wild. You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. It's called self-serving. That's what that is. It's completely self-serving without thought of another human being. That's what I'm doing. I never considered my wife or my children and how that was going to affect them. Not at all. Not for a minute, because I'm self-serving, self-absorbed. So, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. That's what we're doing here in the 9th step. This is an amends process. This is the, I think about the 8th or 7th amends that Bill's described to us here. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. Of course, she's going to want to know that. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. And we feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. Do I have the right to implicate another human being? I do not. I don't have the right to do that. But at the same time, doesn't my wife have any rights either? She surely does. So again, Go into prayer. This is about building a relationship with God and the power. It's the same thing happens here. If I had committed a crime and some kind of an offense and I owed a whole lot of money where it might send me to prison, maybe I carry that message inside the wall. Maybe I don't get to carry it out here. I don't know the answer to that. I have to be open and willing to do whatever it takes to clear up the wreckage of my past. So I don't know the answer to this. I'm not saying there's a right answer for any of this stuff. So it says, we are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it should not be repeated. Oh, that's the truth. God willing, God is always willing. That's just what I found out. You know what? I found out that God is always willing. David's the one that's not so willing. I have got a relationship with power. God is always willing to step in when I invite him in. I have availability. He's available to me all the time. And then more than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. There are many justifiable exceptions. And I heard David make make that noise, and I do the same thing. I don't like the word justifiable. I don't think there's ever a justifiable situation for my behavior. Period. The end. Ever. I am accountable and responsible for what comes out of my mouth and the way I walk. That's all there is to it. No wills to lay down no rule of any sort. So he's saying there is no rule, and we have often found that this is the best course to take. So I don't know the answer. I don't know if there is an answer. There's no pat answer for sure. And I even today, if I was, that's not my experience, so I couldn't counsel them on it. But I will certainly say, where's God in this equation? What have you taken to God?
Yeah, I made that noise as I read the justifiable exception part. I'm not sure I'm capable of not making some sort of noise as I do it. It just, takes me back to earlier in the book and resentments, right? And justifiable anger, that dubious luxury of normal men. It's just a very dangerous word for us. It's very slippery, slopey, right? And this is a tricky paragraph, as David was talking about. And I guess I like that what Bill is saying is we wish to lay down no rule of any sort. We have found this often the best course to take. So what Bill is doing here, and he's done this a fair amount as we've gotten into the Ninth Step Amends, is he's saying, here's what we think you ought to do, but right through counsel with sponsor and a whole lot of prayer, you've got some different ways on which to approach it. And I think it comes down to, what's my motive? And am I getting the desired outcome? If the desired outcome is I don't want to do this hard thing because I'm in fear, my motives and my desired outcomes are out of whack. But if my motive is to try to honor being of maximum service to God and everybody about me, including this, my partner, then maybe there is some latitude on whether or not I take this tactic. I think it's a pretty heavy-handed, if I've been in the wrong, to basically say, yeah, I got to draw the line here and not give any details. For the person that I harmed maybe the worst, that's a pretty tough message to send, right? And so I think that's why Bill's waffling a little bit. And remember, back when we first got into the Ninth Step Amends at the bottom of 76, and he's talking about going to people on a spiritual basis. I love that he says to some people, this is the very bottom paragraph of 76 in the middle of it, to some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. And I think as we're given direction here, as long as I'm not making decisions in a vacuum, you said counsel with my sponsor or other recovered people, and certainly with prayer, I think all the direction is on the table to be executed in different ways relative to motive and the outcome we need to achieve. I don't think it's as easy as just saying, we always do it this way. Bill says it's the rule, or it's not a rule, just his recommendation and what out of his own experience and out of his own marriage, right? So everything filtered through Bill's experience. Bottom of 81. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. Okay. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy.
I have vent, which is to give expression to, as to vent one's anger.
Okay. Thank you, Abby. So yeah, so we like to bounce around the book. So here it is first part of this first sentence, our design for living. If you want to hang on to page 81, second paragraph, let's go back to page 28 in the second paragraph, if you would please, if you want to follow. And I'm going to read the whole paragraph because it needs to make sense.
Mm.
So 28, second paragraph, where it starts out with we. We in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of a drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. It's a promise that we talk about. And there's another reference to it on page 15 in the first full paragraph in Bill's story as he's convalescing, recovering from alcoholism in Towns Hospital. So let's go to that paragraph and also look at what it means to have a design for living. First paragraph starts out with my wife. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates to remain skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time. I was plagued with waves of self-pity and resentment that sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, pay attention here, please. Work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. That design for living for me is working with another. Constant thought of another human being. We go page 20. I could go all over the book. Bill's talking about it here. This design. It is not a one-way street either. This program is just not for me. I should be a demonstration in my household. I have been a demonstration. All my children grew up, went to college, and I went to work every day as a sober member of Alcoholics and Cocaine Anonymous. And I try to practice these principles in all my affairs. The hardest place to practice those things for me was in the home. But as I practiced them, as I brought God in the equation all the time, it was not a one-way street. It was not, this is not a selfish program. I disdain people that say that. I don't want to hear that. This is a selfless program. More God, less David. But here's an opportunity for me, armed with the facts about myself, to get out of self and make this a demonstration in not only my wife's life, but also in my children's life, and now my grandchildren's life, and my daughter's boyfriend's lives, and their husband's lives, and stuff like that. I treat my wife, I put her common welfare before my own today. That's the practice of these principles in all my affairs. And then if we, it is good for the wife as for the husband. Flip the page. If we can forget, so can she. I would not have forgot having an affair on my wife, and I would not expect her to either. It's just like dropping the F-bomb or calling her, it's verbal abuse. You can't take that kind of stuff back. I just don't. I can't do those things. It's not expected of her either. It is better, however, that one does not easily name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. And we found out in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, jealousy is the worst human emotion. And what did I do? I arose jealousy. I caused the harm. She did not do it. Doesn't matter how it led up to it. It was my actions that put me in this position. And now I don't have the right to name another person who's telling me here, but I aroused this jealousy. So the key to that thing to get free of all this stuff is the design for living. One alcoholic working intensively with another alcoholic, and then being in demonstration in the life of my wife and kids, meaning that I don't treat her the same way as I did when I first came in. I treat her like a child of God that she is.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a little sneak preview here of what a lot of the content in the chapter to wives and the family afterwards is going to look like. It's going to have some good appeals to be an example and a demonstration to our family, so that hopefully they may want to join us on the broad highway, right, in our program recovery. The other thing that's a sneak preview of here that's also, especially in the chapter to wives, is a lot of tall asks by Bill of the damaged spouse. Right. I think it's pretty tough language. If we can forget, so can she. I don't know. I think that's a pretty big ask, And let's just, again, not not bashing Bill. He's a great man. He wrote this thing clearly with God speaking through him, right? And we are all clean and sober and well today because of him. But he was a fallible human being, just like the rest of us. And there's some self-serving content here, and it's okay. Again, not bashing him. I owe so much to this guy, but let's read it for what it is, right? It is appropriate that he's doubling down, though, I think, on the spiritual ideal, which is that in this exercise of making my ninth step amend to my partner, that I do not go about harming somebody else, right? That's not a new concept here in the ninth step. I'm just saying in this scenario, it's very tricky. Probably some of us have had this very experience. Top of 82. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Ding, 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 ding. David was just talking about this. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk a face-to-face combat.
I have generalship and flank. Generalship is leadership, and flank is the side of anything.
Hey, thank you.
Do you want me to go? You want to go?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right. All right. So, second sentence: no outsider can praise such an intimate situation. No sponsor, no group, no Bill Wilson. Mind your own damn business is what I'm hearing there. That's what I hear. It's really not my business. I can't counsel them on something I have no experience with. And it may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. It may happen. I don't know. Don't put limits on what God can do. If my behavior is changing, if I actually apply these principles in all my affairs, if I practice and live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, over time, things can be healed. As long as I don't repeat the same behavior, right? Meaning no flirting under any circumstances whatsoever, and being the best husband that I can be. And can I do that in my own power? I absolutely cannot do that in my own power. That has to become through me. It does not come of me. But that is the exact direct result of working these steps in my life. And then it says, each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. So yeah, that's my job anyways, to pray for my wife. A lot of times I'll pray the serenity prayer for her, whatever the circumstances, or for my sister, or for my daughter, or something like that. We have so many great prayers in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in the fellowship too. Not all of our prayers are in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's okay. I'm just trying to, because I have God available to me, I'm trying to tap into that, have access to that, bring God into that. Always go, because all my relationships, every single relationship is dependent upon what my relationship looks like with God that day. So I'm always inviting God in. And then it says, keep always in sight that we're dealing with the most terrible human emotion, jealousy. I don't think you can argue with that. When you arouse jealousy that way, I think it cuts deep, and then the knife gets turned. I think it's a horrible situation. But good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank. So that's kind of an indirect amends, I believe, rather than risk a face-to-face combat. So face-to-face combat is I can never solve hatred with hatred, argument with an argument. I got to bring God in. And I don't know if I'll do this justice, but David and I, a gal that I sponsor, her and her wife they're divorced today. But when they used to get it testy with each other, they would realize it in the moment, one or the other. And they said, "Hey, can we just calm down for 1 second and grab hands and say a little prayer and invite God in?" It's kind of hard to stay mad after you invite God in, because where two or more of us are gathered together, He is there. And they would gather hands and they would pray. and then they would have that discussion at another time, or it wouldn't be so heated anymore. So, uh, this for me, I gotta have. Do I desperately need Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous? I absolutely do. But boy, do I desperately need God, and especially in these domestic troubles, if I had caused them. Go, David.
Yeah, thanks. I was dwelling a little bit on the second sentence in this paragraph. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. So, and David already enumerated some of the people, and what it really made me think about was, some of the content in the sex inventory back on 69. We throw this one around a lot. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. So I feel like there's a link here that Bill's doubling back and saying it's not our job as peers, as sponsors, as step guides, as elder statespeople, bleeding deacons, whatever our current AA, CA, whatever hat we're wearing, to come in and weigh in on such a delicate matter. Really, this is the kind of thing that's got to be sorted out through prayer. It's just, I don't know. It's too much responsibility to be taken on in somebody's life to try to weigh in as an outsider, right? And I love the direction here to pray about it. And David, told that story of our friend. And I remember when they were telling me, my wife's in recovery too. She's been clean and sober coming up in 18 years, and they told us this, and we're like, wow, what a really great idea. So we're getting snippy and angry with each other, and we stop and like hold hands and say a little prayer. And we haven't done that in a while. Maybe we can do that tonight. It's amazing how it works. Things really get right sized, and it's such a simple little tool, And just that analogy at the end, a good generalship may decide the problem be attacked in the flank rather than risk face-to-face combat. Bill's just carrying a little bit of a military analogy here, right? So generalship, the general is the guy in charge who's running the battle, running the war, so to speak. And the flank is coming to the side, right? Instead of straight on. So exactly how we interpret that, like David said, indirect versus direct, I don't know. It's just a matter of, I think, saying that there's a little bit of discernment here, as I've been saying about all these sections. If my motive is true, and I'm achieving the desired outcome, then there's probably some flexibility in how we approach things, right? Okay. Paragraph 2 on 82. If we have no such complication, there is plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. And just for clarity here, how Bill is using sober in this moment is he's saying physically sober is what he means. Right? And you'll see why this is important. Certainly he must keep sober, physically sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he's yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead. Abby? So I'll just sort of jump in here and get us started. We just had several paragraphs talking about the high likelihood that we screwed up in our primary romantic relationship, right? Our partnership or marriage. But it's saying, okay, but maybe you're in the small percentage. Didn't have this. And frankly, I was one because I was incapable of being in a long-term relationship, right? That was part of my malady is every time something started to get serious, it was usually around the 3-month mark, I was out the door, right? So it's saying if I didn't have such a complication, still there's plenty to work on getting better. And the most important part of this for me is Bill saying, if we're talking about a drinking problem, I started going to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous because I wanted to stop drinking. I didn't know I had a spiritual malady. I didn't know the problems of my life were related to my spiritual malady, my alcoholism, my drug addiction. I didn't know any of this. I just wanted something to get better, right? So my entire focus was, okay, how do I stop drinking and drugging? That was it, right? So the cleaning up of the past and new behaviors, I couldn't conceive of such a thing. But what Bill's talking about here is we have the entire wrong idea, and we kind of need to make this clear to new people when they come in. Oh yeah, you're not going to drink or drug anymore, whatever your substance or process addiction problem is. We're going to get over that, but that's just the start, right? We're going to get spiritually right, and then we're going to have a whole lot of cleaning up in the past to do. I've got to get spiritually right. I've got to put down, in my case, right, my substance problems, which is all mind-altering substances I'm powerless over, my experience. I had to put the stuff down, which at the beginning is a whole lot of white knuckling, right? Because if I'm used to drinking and drugging all the time, and I haven't got to God and I don't have a way to get recovered yet, what else am I doing? I'm holding on for dear life, right? But this is why David's always talking about, and he got it from our buddy Howard. There's this window of opportunity. When I came in, I had one, right? Abby came in, she had one. We all had one. And for everybody here who's recovered today, somebody got us right inside that window of opportunity. And inside that window of opportunity, I take the steps and I get to this point that I'm physically sober and I'm starting to gradual widening of my spiritual awakening. And as I do this, I'm fulfilling, my new role for God as his agent. And this is how I can go forward then without fear, with good discernment and in prayer and in counsel from a sponsor to go about making these amends. But we're super unthinking if we take the position that, hey, I'm not drinking anymore, I'm not doing coke anymore. Isn't that enough? Shouldn't you be happy? Right? And then in the next paragraph, we're going to have this great analogy that our buddy Terry always talks about and does a great job when he's speaking. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing, right? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, there's a lot of chalked into this paragraph for
Yeah.
me anyways.
Yeah.
And you did a great job. I mean, I love when you talk about the window of opportunity here. And it really does relate to that second sentence. And I like to take that sentence and turn it into a question, because in this paragraph, we'll ask the question, and in the next paragraph, they'll answer the question. If I play a game here and just take this question. So sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. So David, is that what you think, that the alcoholic only needs to do is keep sober? Keep that one in mind. Hang on to it for a minute, because when David reads the next paragraph, it's going to answer that question. But also, I like to connect dots to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we go back to, and there's a solution on page 19 in the first paragraph. And I like to read the whole paragraph. The reason why I like to is otherwise I leave too much content out and how we're setting this thing up. Because David started us out by explaining what that sentence meant there. So 19, first paragraph. None of us makes a sole vocation of this work. So we're talking about carrying the message. This is not our job. This is our avocation. Nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. Here we go. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Just beginning. That's it. Just a beginning. So it's also saying that the drink is not the problem. My unmanageability is the problem. And much more important of what? Demonstrations of our principles lie before us in what? Our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. There's 3 chapters in the back of the book that address the same exact thing, to the wives, family afterwards, and the employers. Bill's is a mystic in how he writes. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort which we're going to describe. If you are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to this work. And also on page 100 of the book, I think it's 100, that we need to be inconvenienced. It's okay. I'm not doing enough of them not being inconvenienced. There's 12 inconveniences in the Big Book too. But anyways, so back to page 82 in the second paragraph. And this is the amends portion that is addressed to wives and to parents. This reparation, and certainly we must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. but he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents for whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Did anyone ever think this? Maybe I'm the only one that ever came in Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, and thought that they didn't cause anyone any harms. I was just harming myself. I did. I told my sponsor that. He looked at me like his mouth flapped open, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he passed out.
I was a
He's
selfless
like, "Dude."
angel. Are you kidding? I was a martyr. Oh, you know what I did for everybody? Don't you know?
And here's some of the harms that I caused my parents: sleepless nights. Many nights that they had to get up and bail me out of jail. Many times they had to go get me off the side of a road somewhere, bail me out of a situation here or there. Worry to death about the way I was living, about their grandbabies. My in-laws were scared to death that I was going to destroy the family because of my raging alcoholism, which they didn't even understand, but it doesn't matter. They don't need to. So those are the harms that I had caused. And then it says here's passing all understandings the patient mothers and wife have had with alcoholics. Again, Bill talked about it earlier on, on the last page here about the married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. He's reemphasizing it again. The parents who did that, the wives, the husbands, the mates, whatever the case may be. And then it says, had this not been so, many of us would have had no homes, my truth for sure, and perhaps be dead. Another truth. Oh my God, it's so true. And death never scared me, and losing my home never scared me. I got sober because of a feeling, and ended up being in a psych ward after I got arrested, and they put me in there for however long I was in there for, and I had this moment of clarity. The moment of clarity means this to me: that God froze a liar in me long enough to see the truth, and the truth was that this is my life, and it was never going to get any better than this. I don't know how I knew that. God put that inspired thought into my head, and I did something against my nature that I'd never done in my entire life. I went to a payphone. Yes, there was payphones when I got sober, and I called someone in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said, "Need help." That's when my life changed. And that window of opportunity that David talked about was like closing quickly, even in the psych ward. And that guy, you know what I did? I followed directions. I went to a meeting the minute they released me from, and I met that guy who I called on the phone. They released me from the psych ward and they took me to jail, and I bonded out of jail. And I went to a meeting that night because I followed another person who was armed with the facts about themselves and how to stay sober, because I didn't know how to do that. And I've been around for about 6 years in and out of this program. And I said, I don't know how to stay sober. Would you please teach me these steps? And my life has never been the same again.
I think one of the reasons I think Big Book deep dive studies like this have gotten to be much more popular, and I'm so grateful for it, because we didn't have these pre-Zoom. It's incredible that we have them now. And there's so many great ones, right? I think one of the things that we love as we learn is tying together the different references, jumping forward, jumping backwards, and where David took us back. I want to double down on what David took us back to, right? Because on page 82, where we just read, but he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. So it begs the question, well, how am I going to make good to the wife and parents and everybody else? Back on 19, it tells us, we feel that our elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Yeah, here's how. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. So how am I going to, okay, I sort of, I'm triaged, I stopped the bleeding, right? I put down the alcohol and the cocaine for the moment. Now what? Now I'm going to get better, and then I'm going to go out there in the world, starting in my home, but then everywhere, and demonstrate. That means act. It's not about words. I know you guys are like me. Talk, 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 talk. A lot of sweet promises, a lot of commitments, a lot of turning over a new leaf, especially to the people who cared about us. Talk is worthless. We act, we demonstrate, we show, and that's how we amend, and that's how we repair.
Yeah, what is my practicing these principles that we're talking about there? But what is the message that I'm carrying to my family? Am I carrying this message, or am I carrying partial messages? My message. You know what my message is? A little Big Book, a little 12 and 12, and a whole lot of my opinion. That'll get you really dead. But if I practice these principles in all my affairs, in the demonstrations of my home, these principles lie before us in our respective homes. I love that you brought that up, and I should have did a little bit more on it myself. But my occupation and my affairs, this is how I live. And Mark Houston uses the greatest example. How free do you want to be?
Yeah.
Live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. I got a couple of people who never went through this work, been sober for a whole long time, and I've taken them through this work, and they're blown away by the results of working these steps and having a relationship with God. And David used a key word earlier, agent of God. Being an agent of God. Now they're sponsoring a boatload of people, and they're having big book studies of their own. I got a guy who's 3 years sober, is doing a big book study, and he called me tonight to tell me how great it's going. He's got 40 people live in a room with 2 of his mates, and he's loving every minute of it. And I can feel the spiritual growth inside of him. I'm also seeing the growth of his ego at the same damn time. But
It's in the lineage, right?
Yeah. So,
yeah, it's a big book study that actually David and I started right after we came out of the pandemic, and we could go back in person. We had started it on Zoom, and then we moved in person with our friend Nance, and we did it for a year, and we turned it over to some other guys. It went okay, and now it's one of David's sponsees and one of my grand sponsees are facilitating it. And they stepped up, and it's the coolest thing, right? And it's not about us. All we did was demonstrate, right? But they picked up. They made it a priority. They took it on. And they're so on fire with it. It feels so good. So I'm so proud of those guys. And then, I guess just let me double down on this too. Talks about how our family hung in there for us. Some of us, I know a lot of alcoholics and addicts, family got to the breaking point. We got thrown out. We got cut off. It was interesting. I shared in this meeting, my father, 80-year-old father, he's 81 now, came into AA in the last year, just over a year ago. He's been dry for a year, and he's been sober, I don't know, 3-4 months now, recovered in AA because of his son demonstrating, right? But we were with him, my wife and I, not that long ago. We were talking about, we're so grateful, and he was so happy, that I'm sober all these years. And he's like, and I said, yeah, it could have been so much worse. Could have been all on my own, nobody. He's like, well, you would have always had us. And I'm like, how do you know? I'm like, I'm lucky. I got a low tolerance for pain. Things got bad, and I came in and I stuck around. No. It's easy to be a proud dad when his son's been sober for 20 years. What if I had kept going down? What if I kept heading towards the bitter end? What if I'd gotten to the bitter end instead of accepting the spiritual help, right?
And it's funny, and I don't like being a story stealer, and I try not to be here, but I took my father and my brother out for lunch about a month ago. And my father, because my brother died of alcoholism, directly from alcoholism, drank himself to death. And my father looked at me and he said, how come he couldn't get sober and you did? And I tried to explain it to him. He goes, I don't understand. Because I've never taken a drink in my entire life. He's been sober 92 years, Christ's sake. It's a long time, this guy. Now, he's a little irritable, restless, and discontented. Don't get me wrong. But he's never taken a drink in his entire life. So, but I explained to him the nature of this disease. He didn't quite grasp it at all. But nonetheless, it's just like amount of sobriety that you have. It's about the quality of the sobriety that you have today.
All right. We're going to read this last paragraph, but we may need to double back on it next week.
Absolutely.
Bottom of 82. The alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken. Sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. He's like the farmer who came up out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand? The wind stopped blowing. So let's make sure we understand the analogy that Bill is using here, and it's directly related to what he was just talking about and what we brought up on page 19. Yeah, I got to stop drinking or drugging or whatever that behavior is, right? Many fellowships here that use the big book. But just because I've stopped the bleeding, so to speak, does not mean there's a massive amount of demonstration and restoration that has to happen. So in this analogy, tornadoes blowing through. You have a beautiful house that's standing. You go down in the storm cellar, and when you come back up, your house is destroyed, in shambles. And the farmer is just happy that the tornado went away. What about rebuilding the house? Sort of literally as well as figuratively is how Bill is talking about this, right? Rebuilding the figurative house, the relationship, and with the farmer, it's the literal rebuild of the barn and everything that got blown away to the land of Oz, right? And how about this list of harms in here?
Mhm.
These are very specific. Do you relate? Did you cover this in your 4th and 8th step inventories? Consider. Hearts are broken. Did I break any hearts? And we're not just talking about the heartbreaker in romantic relationships. Let's talk about everybody that cared about us, right? Extended family and friends and coworkers. Did I break any hearts? Sweet relationships are dead. Did I kill some sweet relationships? Again, romantic and otherwise tender. Affections have been uprooted. Have I uprooted affections, right? Have I changed them? Have I removed them? Have I devastated them? Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. Did I keep the home in turmoil through selfish and inconsiderate habits? And I ask myself this question. Do I think the physical sobriety is enough? Should I be contented with that? Should the people around me, the people that care about me, the people who love me, is that good enough for them? At the beginning, they usually say yes, because again, we've stopped doing damage. So there is some relief to those people around us. But after a little bit, it's usually pretty quick passage of time, they want more and they deserve more. And we got to get our tails in gear, demonstrating, right, and restoring. Go ahead, David. And we lost Abby. She had a
Yeah, I saw
emergency.
that.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so the alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. You guys probably all have experienced a tornado or at least seen one on TV, and it's a horrible thing unless you're in the
Mhm.
center of the whole thing. I mean, it's just completely disruptive. And if I was at the center and all the things that were spinning around me, do you think I had any control? I could grab any of those things and stop its perpetual motion immediately? I couldn't. I don't have the power to do that. But we're talking about here, the prior paragraph was talking about, but he's yet a long way from making good to a wife or parents whom years he has so shockingly treated. So if I don't know if I've caused any harm, here's a great paragraph that David pointed out. Affections have been uprooted or sweet relationships are dead. 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 I don't know. Once you're dead, I think you're dead. Maybe there's no way to rekindle them things. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. So that doesn't even necessarily relate to drinking and drugging. This is about my verbal abuse, my physical abuse, whatever the case may be. All those things need to change, and I can't do that through me. I have to have that come up of me. It has to come through me. That is the direct result of these steps. And then remember, I said I took some liberties here in the 82 in the second paragraph, where I took a statement, I turned into a question that David, do you hear an alcoholic say that only thing he needs to do is keep sober? Well, here's the answer on page 82 in the third paragraph. We feel a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. It's not enough. It's never going to be. Just not drinking is not enough. Everything, internal disease with an internal solution. I got to continually grow in understanding and effectiveness of what God's will is for me, whatever relationship that is, whatever that is. That's how I do it. And I think we're getting to the top of the hour here. So, like David said, we'll probably come back and revisit this paragraph next week. But yeah, for some reason, when I look at this last part of this paragraph, he is like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. My home was definitely ruined. And I'm not saying physically and literally ruined, but internally it was completely damaged. Damaged. Beyond I could not repair it on my own power. There's a timeline. It takes a while to do it. I heard a guy say, one of my buddies came into the program And old timer had 40 years, and he goes, "Man, I really want what you have." And he says, "Kid, are you even old enough to be in Alcoholics Anonymous?" And I just thought that was hilarious, because the fact is like, yes, anybody could be an Alcoholics Anonymous, but I got to repair the damage that's done. The directions, the treasure map is in this book here. And to his wife, he remarked, "Don't you see? Don't see anything the matter here?" Yeah, because I'm selfish, self-centered, self-absorbed. I can't see beyond myself. That's what the principles of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and having a good sponsor, and a good sponsor is kind of the key to that. Man that's armed with the fact about themselves, and some really good running buddies.
Nice. Okay. We'll wrap it there, and we'll double down on this paragraph next week when we get started.
Okay, very good.